is the unluckiest man in the world. Gi-yeon here has just gambled the last of his life savings on a horse track and manages to win 4 million won. Collecting the money from the teller, he runs out to spend his new hard-earned cash and steps outside to call his family with the good news. He's on top of the world. But that's when he notices a gang of loan sharks approaching him and realizes his luck has just run out. Panicking, he runs back inside to escape them but crashes into this woman and falls to the ground, now realizing that this pickpocket has just stolen all of his winnings. The loan sharks finally corner him in the restroom to collect his debt, but when he checks his pocket, he finds it slashed open and his money has disappeared. With nothing to collect, they force him to sign his contract with his own blood, promising to pay them back in 1 month. Depressed, the gambler sits on the subway bench to wait for the next train home, when this businessman comes over to talk to him. He asks if Gi-yeon here wants to play a game, and the gambler thinks he's just an annoying salesman, but then he opens his briefcase, revealing stacks of cash and 2 folded paper squares. The salesman invites him to play the Korean game Dakji, promising to give him 100,000 won every time he wins, but he'll have to pay the salesman if he loses. It's a ridiculous gamble, but with everything to gain, Gi-yeon decides he's in. The man places a folded paper on the ground, and the gambler tries to flip it over, but he only manages to make the red tile jump. He's failed, but when the salesman takes his turn, he flips it over on the first try. Gi-yeon tells the man he doesn't have the money to pay him, but the salesman offers to reduce his debt in return for 1 slap in the face. It's an offer he can't refuse, and desperate to win, he takes the slap to continue playing. He keeps losing each round, getting smack after smack until finally he throws down his tile and flips the salesman's paper over. Gi-yeon has just won 100 grand for playing a show. Even though he won, this one victory will soon lead the gambler to playing 6 of the most terrifying death games you could possibly imagine. And then here collects his winnings, and the salesman tells him he can win more money playing other children's games, but he turns down the offer. That's when the salesman stands up and reveals he knows the exact amount of money Gi-yeon owes to loan sharks and that he'll be killed if he doesn't pay it back. The gambler asks him how he knows this, and the salesman hands him a business card telling him to call if he wants to join the competition of a lifetime. Gi-yeon considers his offer, but this will be the biggest mistake of his life. Celebrating his newfound luck, he returns back home to have dinner with his mother, but the woman knows the money came from gambling. She tells him that his ex-wife is planning to move to America, and he'll only be able to see his daughter if he has the finances to prove he can care for her. Gi-yeon is devastated, and realizing she's right, he decides to call the number on the business card, telling the salesman that he accepts his offer to play another game. Later that night, he waits outside to be picked up when a van pulls up to the sidewalk. Getting inside, he begins to notice that all the other passengers are asleep, but when the van starts to fill with toxic gas, the gambler realizes he's just f***ed up big time and gets knocked unconscious. When the man opens his eyes, he wakes up to find himself lying in a bunk bed, surrounded by hundreds of others and cots just like him. They're all wearing uniforms with numbers on them, and as everyone gathers in the center of the room, the front door opens and a team of guards walk inside. This man with a square mask tells them they will be playing in 6 different games, and those who make it through all 6 games will get a cash prize. This man demands to know why they were brought here, and the guard presses a button, playing a montage of several people being slapped. Everyone in this room is drowning in debt, and they've all been invited here to win enough money to pay it off. The players all line up to sign consent forms with 3 clauses, stating that they must keep on playing, that if they refuse to play, they'll be eliminated, and that the games can be ended if the majority of players agree to stop. Okay, there's nothing more dangerous than a room full of desperate people who have nothing to lose, and that's why the real threat are these players, not just the games. After being processed, they're all taken to their first game, entering an outdoor room with a massive clearing, and in front of them is a giant doll standing at the other end of the field. Gi-yeon here recognizes one of the players as his childhood friend Sang-woo and walks up to say hello. Suddenly, the gates behind them lock shut, and the competitors are told they'll be playing the children's game Red Light, Green Light. Players must run to the finish line while the doll looks away, but if it looks back and catches them moving, they will be eliminated. They have only 5 minutes to cross the finish line, and with that, the game begins. The players start running across the field, but the doll suddenly announces red light before anyone expects it, and this player is caught completely off guard. It spots the man still trying to catch his balance, and a voice announces that he's eliminated. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out, and the player collapses to the ground, motionless. He's just been shot dead. And realizing they've been tricked into playing a death game, everyone starts running for the exits. But the doll is detecting every movement, and bullets start flying. By the time the shooting stops, over 100 people have been murdered, and the surviving players are left frozen in fear. The doll turns its head back, announcing its green light, and the group starts moving again, determined to make it out of here alive. Using this guy like a shield, this girl cleverly falls behind another player to hide herself from the doll's sight. It's the same girl who stole the gambler's money earlier when he was running from the loan sharks, and without hesitation, she pulls the man down to launch herself ahead of the pack. Guillaume here tries to move forward, but he's grabbed by an injured player who begs him for help. One wrong move, and he's going to get him shot. But luckily, the doll turns back around just in time, and he breaks out of the man's grip. There's now 1 minute left, and the players are finally starting to reach the finish line. The man is only a few meters away from beating this game, but just as he takes a step forward, he trips over a dead body. He's about to fall on the ground, but another player saves his life, holding him up until the doll announces green light. With only 3 seconds on the timer, Guillaume jumps through the air and finally makes it across the finish line. The remaining players who haven't crossed are all brutally shot to death, and the survivors look up to notice a massive roof close overhead. They have no idea they're on a private island in the middle of nowhere, and the only way out of here is to win. That's 1 game down. After the game, the guards come in to congratulate the survivors on passing and announce that 255 players were killed. It's a horrifying number, and afraid for her life, this woman steps forward begging the man to let her go home. Several other players join her in protest, but that's when this massive piggy bank drops down above them and starts to fill with more cash than they've ever seen in their lives. The survivors are shocked, and the masked man tells everyone that they have an opportunity to win 45.6 billion won, but if anyone leaves, then they won't get a single penny. With that, a voting machine is set up in front of them and they all cast their votes, but the majority of players agree to quit. The masked man tells them they can still come back if a majority agrees to compete again, and the players are sent back home. Now it turns out that every single one of them realizes their lives outside are much worse than they remember, and Guillaume here returns to keep playing, but they're all going to instantly regret it, because this next death game is even more screwed up than the last. The vans take them to the private island, where a team of workers dress them into their uniforms, and the players finally wake up back in the same place as if they never left. Later that night, Guillaume talks of his childhood friend and suggests they team up for the next game to increase their odds of winning. The man agrees it's wise to join forces, and spotting the player who rescued him last game, the gambler insists this man join them too. That's when the old man asks if he can also be a part of their team, and Guillaume happily accepts him into the group, but his friend is not happy he invited someone so old to join their team. The next morning, all the players are led into a new arena, and as they pour in, they find an oversized playground in front of them. A voice instructs them to line up in front of one of the 4 shapes on the walls, and their choices are a circle, triangle, star, and umbrella. That's when Sang-woo here has a flashback to his childhood and suddenly realizes what this game is, but the man doesn't tell anyone what he's just discovered. Guillaume here asks him if they should all choose the same shape, but he rejects the idea, suggesting they should split up to reduce the risk. Finally, the doors open as the announcer instructs them to take a case from the tables, and the players find a thin piece of hard sponge toffee with a shape in the middle. They'll have to use the needle to poke out the shape in 10 minutes, but if they crack it, they'll be executed. The game begins, and Guillaume here carefully starts breaking off pieces of the candy, but another player immediately cracks his honeycomb in half. Without hesitation, the guard pulls out his pistol and shoots the man dead, making him the first casualty of this game. It starts a chain reaction, as more people are executed without mercy. Guillaume is sweating from the pressure. The umbrella is the hardest shape to cut, but suddenly the man has a revelation. Seeing the beads of sweat falling onto the candy, he realizes he might be able to melt it with his saliva from the bottom because the outline of the shape is thinner than the rest of the honeycomb. He starts to lick the toffee while other players begin to follow his lead, and with 12 seconds left on the clock, Guillaume desperately breaks apart his honeycomb, perfectly removing the umbrella from the mold. Despite all odds, he's won again. That's 2 games, with 4 more to go. Players go back to the main room where the results of the second game are announced. 79 people were killed with 108 left standing, and that's now 34.8 billion won in the bank. Later, the players will gather for lunchtime, but when the last of them walk up to get food, they're shocked to find there's nothing left. Angry, the man yells at the guard for being unfair, but suddenly this girl stands up and points across the room, telling everyone that these players here cut the line to take seconds. The man walks up to the gangster and tries to pull the water out of his hand, but he's overpowered and the bottle shatters on the floor. Furious, this guy slaps him to the ground and starts beating him to death as the guards do nothing to stop him. All of a sudden, the scoreboard announces another player has died, and the total cash prize goes up by 100 million won. A couple of guards walk in to take the body away while everyone stares in horror, realizing that this game just got a lot more dangerous. Later, Sang-woo here tells his team to stay awake tonight in case they're attacked. The other groups are preparing for a fight, but Guillaume here notices this girl across the room and recognizes her as the pickpocket who stole his money. The man approaches and invites her to join the team, but she rejects his offer, insisting no one here can be trusted. That night, they all get into their beds and nervously wait for the guards to leave the room. Once the lights are turned off, several people slowly begin to leave their cots, searching for an easy kill. Suddenly, this player panics as the thug grabs her and stabs the woman to death. This one murder causes a chain reaction, and all the other players begin killing each other for cash. Gi-yeon and his team try to defend themselves, but that's when they hear the old man begging everyone to stop fighting. And when the lights turn back on, the guards run into the room, putting a stop to the madness. The next morning, all the players wake up, but Gi-yeon here notices how tired the old man is and finds out he stayed up all night watching over the team in case someone attacked them. He's exhausted, but there's no more time to rest because the third game is about to begin. The players are led into a white room where they're told to divide themselves into groups of 10. Sang-woo here realizes that a team game could mean it's a physical challenge, and thinks they should find stronger men to join them. The group splits up to search for more players, but with time running out, they only manage to bring in the outcasts, realizing that 3 skinny women and an old man could put them at a severe disadvantage. The groups are taken into another room where they see 2 massive platforms, and they're told that today's game is tug of war. They'll need to pull on the rope until the other team falls off the platform to their deaths, and the guards draw lots to decide who will go first. When it's finally their turn, Gi-yeon and his team stand up to see who they'll be facing, but find that their opponents are all stronger than them. They're completely outmatched, and know they won't be able to beat them with brute force. But as they ride the elevator up to the platform, the old man tells them he knows exactly how to win. Gi-yeon takes a position at the front to act as a leader, with the strongest player at the very back. The group stands on alternating sides with their feet pointed forward, and as soon as the game begins, they all lean back as far as they can, using their whole body to pull on the rope. With this technique, they're able to get the advantage within the first 10 seconds and tug the other team closer to the edge, but it doesn't last for long. Their opponents gain their second wind, and the group loses their footing as they're dragged closer to the edge of the platform. But that's when Sang-woo here has a brilliant idea. He yells at everyone to take 3 steps forward at his signal, and with no other plan, they do as he says. The group steps forward, knocking the other team off balance, and it sends them tumbling to the ground. Now with the advantage, Gi-yeon's team is finally able to pull the others off of the platform, and as the blade cuts through the rope, the players collapse, just happy to be alive. That's now 3 games they've won, and there's only 3 more to. Next morning, the players are brought to another room where they're given instructions for the next game. They will need to pair up with one other person, and they have 10 minutes to find a partner. The players immediately start looking for anyone that'll help them win, but Gi-yeon here notices that they're all ignoring the old man. Approaching him, he reaches out a hand offering to be his partner, and the two join up. By the end, the only person who doesn't have a partner is this woman, and with an odd number of players, everyone else leaves for the game while she's dragged away by the guards. Inside the arena, the players are led through a room that looks like an old Korean neighborhood, and are each given a pouch filled with 10 marbles. The old man tells his partner that he was good at playing with them as a kid, but makes him promise to be ganbu, best friends, if he wants a chance to survive this game. Suddenly, an announcement tells the players they must use the marbles to play a game of their choice and take all 10 of them from their partner in order to win. Sang-woo here decides to play a game of odds or evens, and his partner has never played before. But after only a few rounds, Ali here manages to get the better of him, winning all but one of his marbles. The man is devastated, and he begs his partner to help him survive, asking for one last chance to play against the other teams to take their marbles instead. His partner decides to trust him, and that's when Sang-woo asks for the man's pouch. Placing it under his jacket, he secretly switches it out with his own before stripping his shirt to create a sling. Hanging his pouch around the man's neck, he tells him to go searching for others to play against, and the man leaves. With his partner gone, he puts his last marble in the full pouch he stole and hands it over to the guard, becoming the winner. It's a filthy trick to play, but he did what he needed to survive. Meanwhile, Gi-yeon plays against the old man, cheating in each round until he's down to one less marble. Realizing he's about to lose, he decides to surrender to his best friend, and Gi-yeon breaks down in tears. With all 10 marbles, he walks away the winner as the old man gets killed, and with 4 games down, there's only 2. The victors return to the main room, and they're all surprised to see that this woman is still alive. She explains that since she had no one to pair with, the game let her skip the challenge, and after everything they've been through, the others are furious. The next morning, all the players wake up to a group of guards coming in with a coffin, and Gi-yeon here realizes that one of their fellow players decided to quit during the night. Looking up, they watch as the man's life turns into cold hard cash, and that's when the PA announces that the 5th game is about to begin. The group is taken to a room with a row of mannequins wearing numbered vests, and they're told to each choose one for their next challenge. Rushing in, everyone gets their pick, but when Gi-yeon finally steps up to choose, the only vests left for him are numbers 1 and 16. He considers taking number 1, even though that means he'll go first, but this player asks to have that number instead, and he agrees to let him take it. Finally, they're brought into the game room, and the announcer tells them they will be playing glass stepping stones. They must remove their shoes and walk over tempered glass to make it across the bridge. But if they step on a panel made from regular glass, they'll fall to their death. With 60 minutes on the clock, the first player takes off his shoes and approaches the bridge. Nervous, he jumps to the first tile and makes it, but when he moves on to the second, the man falls straight through the glass. Horrified, the other players have no choice but to continue, and more people start crossing the glass bridge. One by one, they plummet to the ground as they slowly reveal a path of stable panels for the others to follow. With the first 8 players dead, it's now the gangster's turn to lead the group. But he refuses to move on, telling the others to go before him if they want to pass. Everyone behind him starts to panic. They still have 5 panels left and are quickly running out of time. Suddenly, the gangster comes face to face with this woman and she mocks him for being a coward. Jumping onto his platform, she locks her arms around him, threatening to pull him off the ledge if he doesn't continue. But before the gangster knows it, they break through the glass panel as they both fall to their deaths. With only a handful of survivors and less than 3 minutes left, this man crouches down to inspect the panel in front of him. Sang-woo begs him to keep on moving, but he reveals that he was a glassmaker for 30 years and can tell which panels are tempered from the reflection. The man jumps forwards onto a stable panel, and they realize his theory is working. But that's when the game decides to make things more challenging, and turns off the lights so they can't tell the difference. Panicking, Sang-woo here realizes they won't be able to see the reflections anymore, but the glassmaker has one last trick up his sleeve. He asks for something to throw at the panels, explaining that tempered and regular glass make different sounds. Gi-yeon here passes over the marble he still has, and the glassmaker tosses it in front of him. But with less than 25 seconds remaining, Sang-woo decides to take matters into his own hands. He pushes the man forward, shattering the glass into pieces, and with the path clear, they all make it to the other side. When the timer hits 0, the remaining glass panels suddenly explode and the shards go flying through the air, injuring the 3 survivors. That's now 5 games down and 1 more to go. Later, the players are rewarded for surviving to the final game and given the first real food they've had in days. Starving, the men dig into their steaks, realizing this could be the last meal of their lives. When they finish eating, the staff leave them with their steak knives, and by all appearances, this next game is going to be a vicious fight to the death. That night, Gi-yeon here decides to approach the girl to talk. He asks her what she'll do if she survives, and the girl reveals she wants to get her mother out of North Korea so their family can reunite. It's a touching moment, but suddenly Gi-yeon looks over and notices the other player slouching in his bed. He's fallen asleep, and the man realizes he's got the perfect opportunity to kill him. Pulling out his steak knife, he's about to step forward when the girl stops him, insisting he shouldn't play this way. He hesitates, but the man knows she's right and puts the knife away. That's when he hears the girl gasping and turns around, shocked to find her leaning over in the bed, and realizes she was injured by the flying glass in the last game. Worried, he runs over to the front door and screams at the staff to treat her wounds. To his surprise, the lights suddenly turn on as the workers enter the room carrying a coffin, but they aren't here to help. Gi-yeon looks behind him and sees Sang-woo standing over the girl's bed, and his knife is soaked in her blood. Furious, Gi-yeon goes to attack him, but a guard intervenes, shoving the player to the ground, and as he screams in fury, the coffin closes over the woman's body, leaving the final 2 players left with one last game. Okay, this was devastating, but we all should have seen it coming. Sang-woo here has managed to stay alive because he's the most cold-blooded player in the game, but that's why he was 100% correct to kill this woman. He realized that with 3 players left, there was a huge risk that if the others banded together, they would have a majority. Using the 3rd clause of the contract, this will let them force a vote to quit the game, and he wouldn't be able to stop them. If it were me, I wouldn't let that happen under any circumstances because we've come way too far to give up now. That's why he took matters into his own hands before it got that far, and it was a brilliant move to make. Now to be fair, this girl was already bleeding out, and was simply not strong enough to compete in the next game. Her only options were to kill the men during the night, or to force a vote and return back to the mainland. Both of these benefit nobody but herself, and Gi-yeon here seems to keep forgetting that he's a finalist in a f***ing death game. Sang-woo just did him a huge favor and wiped out 33% of the competition, so as heartless and cold-blooded as it was, the man did exactly what he had to do. The 2 men are taken to a corridor where they're told a coin will be flipped to decide who will be defending or attacking. Picking triangle, Gi-yeon here wins the toss and chooses to play offense before the players are finally told that for the last round, they will be playing Squid Game. As the attacker, Gi-yeon must enter the squid-shaped court and tap his foot inside a circle on the other end to win. The defender wins if he manages to toss the attacker out of the court, but any kind of violence is allowed, and the last person standing will be the winner. Suddenly, the sky goes dark and it starts to rain as the 2 players take their positions. Determined to get vengeance for the girl, Gi-yeon here walks towards his childhood friend and starts swinging his knife, but the other player manages to get him in a chokehold. The two men go at it, and as the players get locked into a wrestling match, his opponent picks up his knife before stabbing Gi-yeon deep into the thigh. He kicks the other player away from him, but with his injuries, he can barely defend himself. The man walks up to him and tries to end his life, but Gi-yeon won't give up, catching the knife at the last second and bites his ankle, forcing the man to back off. Exhausted, he climbs over his friend and beats him into the ground. Song-woo is too weak to continue, and even though he has the perfect opportunity to kill him, Gi-yeon spares his life. Getting onto his feet, he asks the guard about clause number 3, and if they are still allowed to end the game if both players agree to quit. He then offers a hand to his friend, telling him they can both go home, but the man decides to sacrifice himself, letting Gi-yeon win by default. He's completed all 6 games, Sun's worst character flaw, and it nearly cost him his life. He's taken back to the mainland and dumped on a sidewalk with a special debit card as a reward. When he puts it into an ATM, he discovers it's full of the prize